The video file wasn't hidden. That's the detail that haunts me, the small, arrogant oversight that unraveled my entire world. It was sitting in a folder on her desktop labeled simply Projects, right next to the folder labeled Alex's Surprise Party. She was that confident, that careless. She thought I was so predictable, so wrapped up in my own little world of color swatches and font pairings that I would never, ever look. I wasn't snooping. I swear to you I wasn't. I was a man in love. A man who trusted his girlfriend of 5 years with his entire soul. She had asked me to help her with a presentation for work, to make the slides pretty, as she put it. I was on her laptop, navigating her chaotic desktop, when I saw the folder. I opened Projects, looking for her PowerPoint file. And there it was, a video file named weekendideas.move. I thought it was for us. A little travel video she'd put together, maybe a surprise. I smiled. I remember that. A stupid, naive, happy smile. I clicked on it. The video opened. It was her, sitting on a hotel bed, her hair a mess, wearing a man's white dress shirt and nothing else. She was laughing, that beautiful, throaty laugh that had been the soundtrack of my life for 5 years. The camera was shaky, as if held by someone lying next to her. Okay, okay, she said, still laughing. So what's the plan after the party? A man's voice, a voice I knew better than my own, replied from behind the camera. The plan, he said, and the sound of his voice in that context was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked all the air out of my lungs, is that we wait for the big contract to land. We let your boring, methodical boyfriend do all the hard work. You take your half of his company. I finalize my divorce, and we are on a beach in Costa Rica before he even knows what hit him. It was Alex. My Alex. My best friend since we were 7 years old. The man who had been the best man at a wedding I had planned to have. Jenna, my Jenna, the woman I was going to ask to marry me next month, leaned forward towards the camera, a wicked, conspiratorial glint in her eyes. Poor Leo, she said, her voice dripping with a pity that was more cruel than any insult. He's so meticulous, so predictable. He'll probably spend a week designing a spreadsheet to calculate his own heartbreak. Then she laughed again. And he laughed with her. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The world just stopped. The sound of the rain outside, the hum of the laptop, my own heartbeat. It all faded into a dull white noise. I was no longer in my sun-drenched home office. I was in a cold, airless void. I was watching a movie of my own life, and I had just discovered that I was not the hero. I was the fool. The mark. The punchline. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the frozen image of her laughing face on the screen. But when the feeling finally came back into my hands, it wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was a strange, terrifying, and utterly clarifying calm. They had called me predictable. They thought they had me all figured out. A simple, methodical man. They were about to learn that the most meticulous planners don't just design buildings, they can also design demolitions. I looked at the desktop again, at the two folders sitting side by side. Weekendideas.move and Alex's Surprise Party. She was planning a celebration of her love for him, and she was going to ask me, Leo, the best event planner in the city, to help her. The irony was so perfect, so beautifully, poetically cruel that it was a work of art. And in that moment, I decided I would give them the party of a lifetime. It would be a masterpiece of design and execution, a flawless, unforgettable event. The surprise just wouldn't be the one they were expecting. To understand the sheer, breathtaking depth of that betrayal, you have to understand the three of us. We weren't just friends. We were an institution, a fixed point in our social universe. Leo, Jenna, and Alex. We were a package deal. I met Alex in the 2nd grade. He was the new kid, the loud, charismatic troublemaker who could talk his way out of anything. I was the quiet, nerdy kid who spent recess designing intricate blueprints for imaginary cities in his notebook. He taught me how to be brave. I taught him how to think ahead. We were two halves of a whole. He was the brilliant, chaotic frontman. I was the quiet, methodical architect who made sure his wild ideas didn't collapse in on themselves. We were brothers. When his father died in a car accident when we were 16, he moved in with my family for 6 months. He wasn't just my friend, he was a part of the very fabric of my life. I met Jenna in college. She was a force of nature, a beautiful, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious art history major with a laugh that could stop traffic. She was drawn to my quiet intensity, my passion for creating order and beauty out of chaos. I, in turn, was captivated by her fire, her spontaneity, her ability to make the most mundane Tuesday feel like an adventure. She was the beautiful, unpredictable variable that made my perfectly designed equation of a life finally make sense. And Alex loved her. Of course he did. He was my best friend. He became her adopted brother. The three of us were inseparable. We spent our weekends together, our holidays together. We dreamed of a future where we would be old and gray, living in houses next door to each other, our kids growing up together. It was a beautiful, perfect picture. After college, my career took off in a way I never expected. I had always been a planner and organizer. I started a small event planning and design company out of my apartment. I thought I'd be doing weddings and corporate parties. But I found a niche. I specialized in creating immersive, high-concept experiences. I didn't just plan parties. I built worlds. For a tech launch, I would transform a warehouse into a cyberpunk city. For a book release, I would recreate a 1920s speakeasy, right down to the secret password and the bathtub gin. My company, Elysian Events, became the go-to firm for the city's elite. I was the quiet, behind-the-scenes magician who could make any fantasy a reality. My work was my art. I was a storyteller, and my medium was memory. And Jenna was right there with me. She was my muse. She had the wild, creative ideas. I had the meticulous, logistical brain to make them happen. We were a perfect team. We moved in together, we built a home. We were, I thought, building a life. Alex, meanwhile, had followed his own chaotic star. He was a serial entrepreneur, always chasing the next big thing. His ventures were always brilliant, always exciting, and they always eventually failed. He was a man who was brilliant at the launch, but terrible at the follow-through. And through every failure, every heartbreak, Jenna and I were his safety net. We were the ones who would let him crash on our couch, who would lend him money, who would listen to him talk through his next brilliant, doomed idea until 3 in the morning. We were his foundation. Looking back now, with the cursed clarity of the betrayed, I can see the cracks. I can see the moments where the perfect picture started to warp. It was the way Jenna started to get restless. Our life, which she had once called our beautiful, peaceful sanctuary, she started to refer to as our little bubble. She craved drama, excitement, a level of chaos that my carefully planned life was designed to eliminate. It was the way Alex started to look at her, the jokes that lingered a little too long, the touches on her arm that were a little too familiar. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Alex. This was Jenna. The two people in the world I trusted most. To suspect them would be a betrayal in itself. So I looked away. I explained it all away. And then came the lies. The small, almost insignificant lies that are the pilot fish for the great white shark of a larger deception. Her girls' nights out that became more frequent. The work emergencies that always seemed to happen on the weekends. His fishing trips from which he would return with no fish and a suspicious lack of a sunburn. The video, no, not a video, the diary. The video explained it all. Their affair had been going on for over a year. It had started, of all places, in my own home. At a barbecue I had hosted, I had been in the kitchen, obsessing over the marinade for the steaks. They had been on the back porch. The video described their first kiss just a few feet away from where I was happily and obliviously playing the perfect host. The video also laid out their plan in sickening detail. They weren't just cheating, they were conspiring. Alex, in his latest brilliant venture, had racked up a massive amount of debt. And Jenna Jenna was tired of being the girlfriend of a successful man. She wanted to be the successful woman. Their plan was simple. They knew I was about to land the biggest contract of my career, designing a massive multi-day tech conference for a global software giant. It was a contract that would come with a huge 8-figure budget and a massive commission from my company. They were waiting for that contract to be signed. Then she would leave me. And under the law, as a domestic partner who had been instrumental in building my business, she would have a strong claim to half of everything. Half of my company, half of my life's work. And she and Alex would take that money, my money, and they would finally have the capital to launch his next brilliant, and this time, successful venture. They weren't just stealing my heart. They were planning a corporate raid on my entire life. So when I sat there in my silent office, the sound of their laughter still echoing in my head from the laptop speakers, my first thought was not of heartbreak, it was not of rage. It was a single, cold, and beautifully clear thought, delivered in the language I understood best. It was a design problem. The problem was this: how do you dismantle a conspiracy when the two conspirators are the people you love most in the world? How do you achieve justice when a direct confrontation would only lead to your own financial gain? And then I looked at the desktop again, at the two folders sitting there, side by side, like a gift from some dark, ironic god. The evidence of their crime, and the blueprint for their celebration. Alex's surprise party. The plan that bloomed in my mind in that moment was not born of rage. It was born of a pure, cold, and utterly perfect sense of architectural logic. I would not destroy the plan. I would build it. I would take their flimsy, treacherous little blueprint. I would turn it into a cathedral of humiliation. I would give them the most perfect, most beautiful, most unforgettable party they had ever seen. The surprise just wouldn't be for Alex. It would be for everyone. The first step in my long, meticulous act of social demolition was to become the world's most enthusiastic and supportive accomplice. 2 days after I discovered the video, Jenna approached me. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen, making pancakes, playing the part of the steady, predictable Leo she knew, and was so carelessly betraying. She came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You're so good to me," she murmured into my back. I had to physically stop myself from flinching. "I was thinking," she said, her voice full of a bright, casual innocence. "Alex's birthday is next month. We should do something. Something big, a surprise party." I turned, my face a carefully constructed mask of mild, pleasant interest. "Oh yeah? That sounds like fun." "I know, right?" she said, her eyes shining with a false excitement. "But I'm so swamped with work, and you're so good at this stuff. I was hoping maybe you could help me plan it." This was it. The invitation. The keys to the kingdom of their downfall. "Of course," I said, with a smile that felt like it was cracking my own face. "Anything for Alex. He's my best friend." And so began the most surreal and psychologically torturous project of my entire career. I had to work side by side with my cheating girlfriend to plan a party for her lover who was also my best friend. It was a masterclass in deception, and I was both the student and the professor. Our first planning session was at a coffee shop. She came with a notebook full of ideas. "Okay," she said, "all business. So I was thinking a rooftop bar. Something chic, exclusive, and a live band. Maybe that jazz trio Alex loves." She was planning their dream date and asking me to be the producer. "Great ideas," I said, my voice a hollow echo of my professional enthusiasm. "Let me make some calls. I know the perfect venue." And I did. I knew all the perfect venues. I was the best in the business. And I was going to use every ounce of my talent, every contact in my phone book, to make this party a flawless, beautiful, and utterly lethal work of art. The second and most crucial part of my plan was to take control of the guest list. This was the central pillar upon which the entire structure of my revenge would be built. The guest list is going to be a nightmare, she said, sighing dramatically. Alex knows so many people, and it has to be a secret. I can't just be sending out a mass email. Don't worry, I said, seeing my opening. I can handle it. I'll create a private, password-protected RSVP website. I'll design a beautiful Evite. You just give me the list of names and emails, and I will handle all the communications. It will be completely discreet. It's what I do. She looked at me, her eyes flooded with a relief that was so genuine it almost made me sick. Leo, you are a lifesaver, she said. I couldn't do this without you. I know, I said. She sent me the list a few days later. It was 100 names long. All of their friends, their colleagues, their families, and at the top of the list, a name that made my blood run cold. Alex's wife, Maria. I had forgotten in the initial shock that Alex was married. He had been for 10 years. Maria was a sweet, quiet woman, a pediatrician who I knew he had been cheating on for years, even before Jenna. He was in the process of a long, complicated divorce. A divorce I now knew that he was waiting to finalize until he had my money to soften the blow of his own infidelity. Jenna had included her on the list, of course, not as a real guest, but as a part of the fiction. Alex's soon-to-be ex-wife. I looked at that list of 100 names, and I knew that this would be my canvas, my masterpiece. Now began the investigative phase of my project. My target was no longer just Jenna, it was Alex. I had to find the other women, the ones his wife didn't know about, the ones Jenna, in her own arrogant self-absorption, had probably never even considered. I became a digital stalker. I went through years of Alex's social media. I looked at every tagged photo, every casual comment. I was looking for patterns. For the same female faces that would pop up again and again in the background of his life. And I found them. There was Chloe, a 24-year-old yoga instructor who appeared in the background of a half dozen of his boys' night out photos. A little more digging, a cross-reference of her public Instagram, and I found it. A photo of her wearing Alex's signature leather bracelet with a caption that just said, "Best weekend ever." The date of the photo corresponded with a weekend Alex was supposed to have been on a solo meditation retreat. There was Samantha, a tough, no-nonsense lawyer in her late 30s who worked at the same firm as one of his business partners. Her comments on his LinkedIn posts were a little too familiar, a little too full of inside jokes. A search of public property records revealed that she had recently purchased a condo in a building where Alex's shell corporation also owned a unit. A secret love nest, and there were others, a handful of them. Women he had met at conferences, at bars. Each one a secret, compartmentalized affair. Alex wasn't just a cheater, he was a collector, and I, the meticulous planner, found every single one of them. Now for the final, most delicate, and most beautiful part of the plan. The invitations. I created the RSVP website, just as I had promised. It was beautiful, elegant. It had a gallery of charming, smiling photos of Alex. It had a heartfelt message from Jenna about celebrating this wonderful man. And then I began the process of social surgery. For the 100 names on the original guest list, their real friends, their families, I sent out a carefully worded email. It was from a new anonymous email address. The subject line was, "Urgent update. Cancellation of Alex Stone's surprise party." The email explained that, due to a sudden and tragic family emergency, the party had to be canceled. It was full of apologies and regrets. It was completely believable. And then I created a new guest list. My guest list. It had about 20 names on it. At the top of the list, Maria Stone, the wife. The invitation I designed for her was special. It was a physical card printed on thick, expensive cardstock. Maria, the invitation read, "You are invited to a special event to honor your husband, Alex Stone, and to celebrate the next chapter of your life together." I sent it to her office, not her home, to ensure she would be the one to open it. Then came the others. Chloe, the yoga instructor, Samantha, the lawyer, and all the rest. They each received a beautiful, personalized evite to the exclusive, invitation-only surprise birthday party for Alex Stone. The trap was set, the venue was booked, the band was confirmed, the caterer was hired, and the guest list was a ticking time bomb. The week before the party was a masterclass in psychological warfare, most of it waged against myself. I had to continue playing the part of the supportive boyfriend, while my soul was a screaming vortex of rage and grief. Jenna was in a state of high, joyous anxiety. "Are you sure everything is handled?" she would ask me a dozen times a day. "Did you confirm the caterer? Is the band all set? Have enough people RSVP'd?" "Everything is perfect," I would tell her, my voice a calm, professional reassurance. "We have a great turnout. Everyone is so excited to surprise him." The lies were becoming easier to tell. I was starting to scare myself. The most difficult part was dealing with Alex. He, of course, was in on the surprise. It was a classic misdirection. Jenna had told him that I was planning a small, guys' night poker party for him. So, when I would call him to confirm the details, he thought he was playing along with a much smaller, more innocent deception. "Hey, man," I said to him on the phone, 2 days before the party. My voice was a performance of brotherly affection. "Just wanted to make sure you're still free on Saturday night. The guys are really excited to celebrate with you." "Of course, Leo," he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "I wouldn't miss it. Just don't tell Jenna. You know how she gets—" "My lips are sealed," I said. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost sublime. We were two best friends lying to each other about a party that was a lie, all for the benefit of a woman who was lying to both of us. It was a perfect, terrible triangle of deceit. The night before the party, Jenna was so excited she could barely sit still. We were in our living room, the one I had designed to be a sanctuary of calm and order. She put on some music, poured us both a glass of wine. "I can't believe it's almost here," she said, her eyes shining. "It's going to be the most perfect night, and it's all thanks to you, Leo. You made it all happen. You are the most wonderful, most predictable man I have ever known. And I mean that as a compliment." She leaned over and kissed me. It was the kiss of Judas. And I had to let her. I had to sit there and accept her affection, knowing that in 24 hours I was going to systematically and utterly destroy her entire world. The wine in my glass tasted like ashes. The day of the party was a study in surreal, slow-motion horror. I was on site at the rooftop bar from noon, overseeing the final preparations. Everything had to be perfect. The flowers, the lighting, the placement of the tables. I was an artist, and this was my masterpiece of social destruction. Jenna arrived at 6, an hour before the guests were scheduled to arrive. She looked breathtaking. She was wearing a stunning backless red dress. She looked like a movie star. "Leo, it's perfect," she breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The rooftop bar looked magical, with strings of fairy lights twinkling against the deepening twilight of the city skyline. "It's everything I imagined." "I'm glad you like it," I said. At 6:45, Alex called her. It was part of the plan. He was downstairs in the lobby of the building, blindfolded. He thought he was being led up to a surprise party full of his best friends. Jenna's job was to go down, get him, and bring him up to the roof. "It's time," she whispered to me, her face flushed with a giddy, triumphant excitement. She squeezed my arm. "Wish me luck." "You won't need it," I said. I watched her go, and then I took my position. I stood in a dark corner of the bar near the service entrance, a single glass of whiskey in my hand. A ghost at my own funeral, and then the guests began to arrive. My guests. First, a woman in her late 20s, with the confident posture of a yoga instructor. Chloe. She looked around, a little confused, as if she didn't recognize anyone. Then a woman in her late 30s, in a sharp power suit, holding a briefcase. Samantha. Her eyes scanned the room with a lawyer's analytical gaze. And then, one by one, the others. A collection of beautiful, intelligent, and completely unconnected women. And finally, at 7:05, she arrived. Maria, Alex's wife. She was a small, elegant woman with kind, sad eyes. She was holding a beautifully wrapped gift. She looked nervous but hopeful. I had, after all, invited her to celebrate the next chapter of her life with her husband. The women all stood around in small, awkward clusters, making polite, confused small talk. The atmosphere was a strange cocktail of curiosity and tension. The band played on, a soft, ironic jazz melody. And then at 7:15, I heard the elevator ding. I saw the doors to the rooftop open, and Jenna led Alex in. He was still blindfolded, laughing, stumbling a little. Okay, okay, I'm ready, he shouted. Surprise me. Jenna led him to the center of the terrace. She stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders, beaming out at the small, strange crowd of women. Okay, everyone, she called out, her voice ringing with joy. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Surprise! She whipped the blindfold off his face. The moment that followed is a moment I will replay in my mind, in slow, delicious detail for the rest of my life. Alex stood there, blinking in the twilight, a wide, foolish grin on his face. And then his eyes began to focus, and his grin began to melt. He didn't see his cheering friends. He didn't see a party. He saw a firing squad. He saw his wife, Maria, standing directly in front of him. Her hopeful smile had been replaced by an expression of pure, gut-wrenching confusion. She was holding up a framed photo, the one from their wedding. He saw Chloe, the yoga instructor, her face a mask of dawning horror as she looked from him to Jenna, to the wife she never knew existed. He saw Samantha, the lawyer, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed into two slits of cold, furious understanding. He saw a dozen other women, a gallery of his secret lives, all staring at him, their expressions a symphony of heartbreak, confusion, and rage. And then he saw Jenna, his beautiful, triumphant lover, whose own beaming smile had collapsed into a mask of absolute, uncomprehending terror as she finally understood the guest list. The silence on that rooftop was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It was so complete, so total, that I think I could actually hear the sound of 2 lives and a dozen hearts breaking all at once. Maria, the wife, was the first to speak. Her voice was a small, trembling whisper. "Alex," she said, "what is this? Who are these women?" Before he could even attempt to answer, Samantha, the lawyer, stepped forward. Her voice was not a whisper. It was a cold, hard, and utterly unforgiving blade. "I can answer that, Maria," she said, not looking at Alex, but at Jenna. "I'm Samantha. I'm the woman your husband has been sleeping with on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for the past 6 months, in the condo he told me he was buying for us." "And who the hell are you?" And with that, the dam broke. The quiet, confused tension exploded into a beautiful, glorious, and utterly catastrophic chaos. It was a multi-front war of confrontation. Maria turning on a sobbing Jenna. Chloe, the yoga instructor, yelling at a completely frozen Alex. It was a symphony of destruction, and every note was perfect. I just stood in my corner, sipping my whiskey, the quiet, invisible architect, watching my masterpiece unfold. After a few minutes of this glorious, primal chaos, I decided it was time for the final act. I walked calmly to the small stage where the band had been playing. They had wisely stopped. I picked up the microphone. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "If I could have your attention for just one moment." Slowly the chaos subsided. All eyes turned to me. The fool. The predictable, heartbroken boyfriend. "I know you're all a little confused," I said, my voice full of a calm, reasonable authority. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. This isn't a surprise party for Alex. It's more of a networking event. I just thought it was high time that all the brilliant, talented, and beautiful women in Alex's life had a chance to finally meet each other." I looked at Jenna, whose face was a ruin of tear-streaked makeup. And I especially wanted to thank the party planner, Jenna, for all her hard work. She was the one who came up with the idea for this wonderful celebration. And she was the one who, in her own words, described the man of the hour so perfectly. I reached into my pocket and took out my phone. I had the audio clip from the video queued up. I held the phone to the microphone, and I pressed play, and my own voice, tinny and terrible, filled the stunned silence of the rooftop, quoting my own betrayal. Poor Leo. He's so meticulous, so predictable. He'll probably spend a week designing a spreadsheet to calculate his own heartbreak. I let the words hang in the air for a moment, and then I looked out at the wreckage of their lives. She was right, I said, my voice a quiet, final verdict. I am meticulous and I am predictable, but she and Alex made one critical, fatal miscalculation. They forgot that the most predictable thing about an architect is that he always knows the exact location of the load-bearing walls. And he knows exactly how to bring the whole damn house down. I placed the microphone gently on the podium. Congratulations to the happy couple, I said. You truly deserve each other. And then I turned and I walked away. I walked through the stunned, silent crowd of women. I walked past the frozen, shattered figures of my ex-girlfriend and my ex-best friend. I walked to the elevator and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The silence that followed me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The aftermath of the engagement party from hell, as it quickly became known in the city's gossip circles, was a thing of beautiful, cascading destruction. The story, in all its sordid, glorious detail, spread like a virus. It was too juicy, too dramatic, too perfectly, poetically just to remain a secret. Maria, the wife, armed with a dozen new, willing witnesses, filed for a divorce that was, I am told, swift, brutal, and financially devastating for Alex. Her lawyers used the testimony of the other women to prove a pattern of infidelity and deception that left him with nothing. His professional life imploded. His reputation as a charming, trustworthy entrepreneur was replaced by a new one. A serial philanderer, a liar, a man who was so arrogant he had literally walked into a surprise party of his own mistresses. His business partners abandoned him. His investors pulled their funding. His latest brilliant venture collapsed before it even began. Jenna's downfall was just as complete. She became a social pariah. Her friends, the ones she hadn't already alienated with her affair, were horrified by the cruelty of what she had done. She lost her job. The art gallery where she worked, a place that thrived on reputation and discretion, could not afford to employ a woman at the center of such a massive public scandal. The last I heard, she had moved back to her hometown, a disgraced queen who had been dethroned in the most public way imaginable. As for me, my life began again. The rage, the cold, all-consuming fire that had driven me for that terrible, lonely year was finally gone, and in its place was a quiet, empty space. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with that quiet. The war was over, and I was a soldier with no mission. I sold the beautiful house I had designed. It was tainted with too many ghosts. I sold my share of the event planning firm. I had lost my passion for creating beautiful illusions. I took the money, and I just left. I traveled for a year. I went to the places I had only ever read about in my architecture books. I walked the ancient streets of Rome. I stood in the shadow of the pyramids. I was trying to find the man I had been before all of this, the quiet, methodical builder who was in love with the world. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to find him again. I live a quiet life now. I have a small architectural practice in a small coastal town. I design small, beautiful, and structurally sound houses for normal people. I have a dog. I have a garden. My life is predictable, and I have discovered that it is the most beautiful, most vibrant word in the English language. Looking back on that night, on that terrible public act of revenge, was it worth it? Yes, but not for the reason you think. The satisfaction of their public humiliation was a bitter, fleeting thing. It was like a flash of lightning, illuminating the wreckage for a moment before plunging it back into darkness. The real victory, the real justice, was in the design. They had tried to build their future on a foundation of chaos and lies on the wreckage of my life. They saw me as a simple, boring, and easily demolished structure. My revenge wasn't just to hurt them. It was to reclaim my own narrative through the only language I truly know, the language of meticulous, beautiful, and utterly perfect design. I couldn't stop the earthquake of their betrayal, but I could, and I did, design and build a better, more elegant, and more complete collapse. And that, in the end, was the only justice that could ever truly satisfy an architect's soul. So, yeah, that's the story. That whole period was the darkest and most complicated of my life. It taught me about the profound depths of betrayal, but it also taught me something else. It taught me that the most powerful weapon in the world isn't anger or money or power. It's a well thought out plan. I'm sharing this because I know so many of you have been betrayed by the people you trusted most. It's a pain that is unique and isolating. It can make you feel like your own story has been stolen from you, that you are just a supporting character in someone else's drama. My story, I hope, is a reminder that you are always the architect of your own life, and you always have the power to design a new, better ending. Whew. Thanks for sticking with me through that. I know it was a lot. But a party that catastrophic? It deserves a detailed explanation, don't you think? It feels good to finally close the book on that chapter of my life. If this story resonated with you, or if your jaw was on the floor for that entire engagement party, please give this video a thumbs up. It really does help. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Was I a hero, or did I go too far? What part of this story was the most shocking to you? The discovery of the video? The year of secret planning? The final public takedown? What would you have done? All right, everyone, that's it from me for this one. Take care of yourselves. Always check the guest list, and I'll see you in the next video.